Hi everybody, welcome back to part 2 of how to make your own spear gun. This is the shaping and fitting stage where we're going to put all of the parts together. We're going to start with the trigger guard and pistol grip. You want to make sure that you put it on, move it back and forth to get the finger spacing just right for your trigger finger, and then go ahead and mark where the trigger guard goes. Now we're going to take a straight flush trim bit, but it's on a fin, so any straight bit will do. And we're just going to cut down about 1/4 inch or so and inset that trigger guard. That'll expose more of the trigger, making it easier for us. So there we go. We've got that inset. Trigger guard is back on, and it's looking pretty good. Now we're going to go up to the muzzle of the gun. I'm going to come down about 3/4 inch or so and draw a line parallel with the top. And then from the end, I'm going to mark in 1.5 inches. Behind that, 1 3/8 inches, and that'll give us a 2-band groove for the gun. And then behind that, I'm going to come back about another 1.25 inches and drill a single hole for my kicker band. Take it over to the bandsaw with a 1/2 inch bit, preferably a brad point, which is making a much cleaner hole. So here I am drilling the single hole for the kicker band, and then I'll move it up a little bit and I'll draw a series of holes starting at each end, going to the end of the slot where the 2 bands are going to fit, and then I'll just kind of work my way up. Essentially, I'm just cutting a groove here with my drill press. Keep moving gently and dig out the wood till you get to your next mark. And that will give you a 1 3/8 by 1/2 inch groove. We're going to need to clean that up because obviously it's a little rough there. So take it back to the workbench, take your chisel, and cut those grooves down as best you can. The more you do it here, the less sanding you'll have to do. So at this point, we're going to take our old dowel with some rough sandpaper and go ahead and smooth out the inside of that groove. Now we're just going to mark the end of the muzzle, kind of shape it a little bit. I kind of like the top rounded off and the bottom coming back a little bit more. Take it to the bandsaw and just cut that off. You don't really need that if you have a good bench sander. You can do the whole thing on the bench sander, but hey, I've got a bandsaw, so let's use it. Now we go over to our disc sander, and we're just going to clean that up a little bit. Okay, now we're going to come in, and I'm going to cut a groove on the bottom underneath the barrel. This will start at about 14 inches from the butt of gun and extend to about 12.5 inches from the muzzle. I'm doing this to eliminate a little bit of wood. These spear guns do tend to get bulky, might affect how it tracks. And by taking out just that little bit of wood, when I go to balance it and ballast it, that will actually save about 2 ounces of lead I would otherwise have to put in. Now I'm taking a cove bit, and I am starting up near the band groove and going back to where about the line release will be on my trigger. What I'm doing here is I'm just removing a little bit, trying to make a little area for the bands to lay down in, but being very, very careful that I don't get anywhere near the edges of the track that I'd laid down for the spear shaft itself. And you'll be able to see that in a moment. Flip it over and route the other side to match. It's starting to look like a gun here. Okay, now I have a round over bit. I am going to go up to our groove in the hole for the bands, and I'm just going to use that round over and smooth out that hard edge. We don't want the bands going against anything hard that might cut it, abrade it, like the straight drill holes would. So we're putting a nice round over on one side, then we're going to flip it over, do the same thing to the other side. Be very, very careful when you're doing this. I've used this enough. I'm very cautious. I know my fingers are close to that spinning blade, but they know how to jump like it's a rattlesnake if something goes wrong. So be very careful if you do that. Now I'm using a round over bit, and I'm just going to go over all the outside edges that are still square, minus back towards the butt. I'm not going to be doing that area. This is really just for the front. I want to leave that back area square for the trigger guard in case I put a reel on it. But you can see where I've rounded over, and we are looking pretty good. Let's take a moment and admire the work so far. Coming along nicely. Part 1 covered all the critical cuts. We're kind of into cosmetics and functionality here, but not critical, like getting the trigger pocket and the groove just right. So there you were. There was the top, the side. Now that's what the bottom is looking like. Now we are going back to the bottom, and I am putting in the line anchor. I'm using a 1/2 inch drill bit here. I had already drawn a line around the line anchor, so I know how long to make it. But I'm just using the drill bit here to gouge out the wood a little bit rather than using my router like I did for the other pockets. So this is just nice and simple. So once you have it, test fit it, and then go ahead and drill the pilot holes that you will need for it. And we're going to do this one more time. Mostly because I just like the sound of that clicking together just perfectly. Take a look at it. It is looking pretty good. So now we're going to stick it in a vise, protect the teeth a little bit so you don't mar the wood. And we're going to take a wood rasp and we're going to cut down an area behind where the bands are going to go to help them lay flush up against that band groove we put along the top. Be very careful here. You don't want to cut into the wood that you have left over, separating that band groove from the shaft area itself. Now we're going to take a carbide rod in the hacksaw, and we are going to cut the line guide right here at the end of the muzzle. When you bring the line forward from the spear, you're going to lay it over the shaft itself, and then this is going to help track it down the other side of the gun. So just smooth it out a little bit, and now we're going to put in the line guide itself, and this is why we didn't go all the way to the front with the band groove. We need as much wood up here to hold it in place. So go ahead and mark it, take your chisel, outline the edges so that when you start pulling the splinters out, it will stop where you made the cut at the end. So go ahead, just chisel that out a little bit. It doesn't take much. And when you've got that, go ahead and put the line guide in. And if it fits the way you want it, mark and pre-drill the holes for the screws. All right, everything is looking pretty good. So much easier when the precision work of the first step is over with, and now it looks like we're actually building a gun. So we're going to put the line anchor in. We've got the line guide in. We're basically dry fitting things here just to get a look at it, make sure that everything is laying the way we want it. Pre-drilling the holes for the trigger guard, and then we'll put the trigger guard in as well. All these steps are easy. Just take your time, get it right. Now we're going to put the pistol grip on and screw that on through the grip itself. All right, let's put the reverse trigger mechanism back in. We've got the trigger. We can finally pull the trigger, make sure that everything does feel just right. And one more time, let's admire our work. By this time in making a gun, it starts to feel pretty good. Going to put the shaft in and mate it together. And at this point, aside from the bands, we have a real spear gun. We're also going to be putting a butt pad on in the final step of finishing. But for now, that's a good bit of work right there. So enjoy it and get ready for part 3. Thanks for watching.